This Saturday, February 10th, 2018, marks the 28th anniversary of what is known as the greatest tragedy in modern history in the city of Las Cruces, New Mexico, if not the state. That morning, two gunmen entered the Las Cruces Bowl at 1201 East Amador Avenue shortly after 8 in the morning. They stole approximately $5,000 in cash, repeatedly shot 7 people ranging in ages from 2.5 to 34, and set the office on fire before fleeing on foot. 3 of the people shot died at the scene, a 4th died soon after at the hospital, and 1 other died several years later due to the lingering effects of her injuries. Police arrived within minutes because one of the survivors, a 12-year-old girl, had only the week before learned in school to call 911, and that lesson was fresh in her mind. Despite the prompt arrival of authorities and despite eyewitnesses who saw the suspects, the gunmen have never in nearly 30 years been located. Countless appeals have been made to the public. Though the Las Cruces police receive tips to this day, this crime has never been solved. For those who have listened to my videos, it comes as no surprise that I consult neighborhoodscout.com for basic information. I personally know the area of Las Cruces, and while it's true there can be a high rate of crime, most of that has to do with property crime. Indeed, most of the crime around New Mexico comes as a result of drunkenness or drunk driving. In Las Cruces, neighborhoodscout.com suggests that murder occurs at a rate of 0.05 per 1,000 people. Annually, it reports a total of only 5 murders. On February 10, 1990, there were 7 people shot execution-style in a single morning, one only a toddler. I would like to first thank the documentary A Nightmare in Las Cruces, directed by Charlie Min, for providing a wide array of background information on this case. While this was the first of Mr. Min's documentaries I'd heard of, it was not the first I'd seen, and another, Where is Robert Fisher, inspired a previous case video. I cannot wholeheartedly recommend Min as a documentary film director. 1984 San Diego McDonald's Massacre, 77 minutes, was unbelievably biased, an example of a director picking an opinion and forcing the film around it, but most of his films are excellent. Early that Saturday morning, Steve Senac, the son of the owner of the bowling alley, Ron Senac, arrived at the bowling alley to pick up the backpack he needed for Saturday class that day. He saw 2 men in the parking lot to the side of the building, men he didn't recognize, that were later identified as the suspects in the shooting. The front door was unlocked. His sister, Stephanie Senac, the manager, was in the office with her daughter, Melissa Repass, age 12, and Melissa's friend, Amy Hauser, 13. One of the bowling alley's cooks, Ida Hogan, was also present. Ida had only recently changed her schedule from the night shift to mornings. When Steve collected his backpack, he told his sister to make sure to lock the front door when he left. Unfortunately, this wasn't done. Soon after, the girls expressed their hunger to Stephanie. Since Ida hadn't finished cooking anything, Stephanie gave the girls change for the vending machines in the main room of the bowling alley. There, they encountered 2 men, allegedly the same 2 Steve Senac had seen when he arrived, who ordered them and Ida into the office with Stephanie. The 2 men had guns and demanded to know where the money was. As this occurred, another employee, Stephen Turan, a former first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, arrived with his 6-year-old stepdaughter Paula Hogan, no relation to Ida, and 2.5-year-old daughter Valerie Turan. They were ordered to the floor. The men shot all 7 of the victims in the back of the head in what has been described as execution style, and the victims were all shot repeatedly. They then started a fire in the office. They stole approximately $5,000 and fled on foot. At 8:29 that morning, 911 operators received a phone call from 12-year-old Melissa Repass, who believed she was the only one conscious. Despite the massive pain she was in, it is evident from her phone call that she was lucid and aware of what had happened. Though her initial report was that the suspects were black, later investigations and interviews with the other eyewitnesses suggested they were Hispanic males with dark complexions who spoke fluent English. Officers were on the scene within minutes of the phone call. 3 of the victims were dead on the scene: Stephen Turan, 26, Paula Hogan, 6, and Amy Hauser, 13. Valerie Turan, 2.5, was described as clinging to life and died at the hospital less than an hour later. The only survivors were Melissa Rapace and her mother, Stephanie Senac, 34, and Ida Hogan, 33. Stephanie Senac passed away in 1999, however, as a result of those injuries received 9 years earlier. Police reaction was immediate. The roads out of Las Cruces were blocked off in an attempt to prevent the perpetrators from leaving town. Border Patrol and Highway Patrol were monitoring the highways. One car was pulled over with 4 men in it and a large sum of money, but when eyewitness Steve Senac was brought over to look at them, he immediately knew none of them were the men he had seen outside the bowling alley that morning. Eventually, composites of the 2 suspects were developed, which were adapted in 2005 to account for 15 years of aging. The older of the 2 suspects was supposedly in his late 30s or early 40s in 1990 and was about 5 foot 5 inches tall, weighing between 160 and 180 pounds, or 165 centimeters and between 73 and 82 kilograms in mass, with a medium build. He had dark hair and eyes and a dark complexion and appears to have had a receding hairline. Today, he could be in his late 50s to early 60s if he is still alive. The younger of the 2 suspects was believed to be in his late 20s in 1990 and between 5 foot 6 inches and 5 foot 8 inches tall and about 190 pounds, or 168 to 173 centimeters tall and 86 kilograms in mass, with a medium build. He also had a dark complexion, dark hair and eyes, and had a thick mustache at the time. If he is still alive, he would likely be in his late 40s to early 50s today. In an interview with the Las Cruces Sun newspaper in 2016, Stephen Turan's brother Anthony was quoted as saying, "In this day and age, things like this don't go unsolved. How did we not get these guys? That's the question I ask myself every day. Numerous people saw these gunmen, so someone out there knows something and they need to come forward." Unquote. That's the crux of the situation. This crime was committed nearly 30 years ago by 2 men who didn't hesitate at shooting a child under the age of 3 in the head. In all that time, how has no one come forward to identify them? Given the proximity of Las Cruces to the Mexican border, it is possible, perhaps even likely, that these men retreated into Mexico, perhaps even into Ciudad Juarez, which is the 36th most dangerous city in the world and the 37th most violent. But since Juarez is literally minutes from El Paso, that doesn't mean they have stayed there all that time, and Juarez isn't a pleasant place to live, especially if you're a US citizen. And I personally feel that in the past 28 years at least one of these men has confessed to at least one person. They intended to kill these people. You don't shoot a person in the head and expect him or her to survive. Though Ron Senac, father of Stephanie and Steve Senac and owner of Las Cruces Bowl at the time, insists that police told him that it was purely a random attack, one investigating detective stated in the documentary A Nightmare in Las Cruces that she never told him any such thing. They didn't know if it was random because there were too many other circumstances. There were other questions in the community regarding Ron Senac's possible involvement, which are purely officially unsubstantiated, I feel compelled to add. Ron, at the time, was living in the bowling alley and was reputedly spending his money frivolously. He had a habit of offending customers and seemed to have an abrasive personality. Ron had left for Arizona the day before the shooting to act as a golf caddy for a friend, golf being his passion. Some people in the community felt he might have had a hand in the cocaine market in the community, and that the shooting had something to do with that. His son Steve feels, however, that the shooting had nothing to do with a statement regarding his family. Another possibility that has been considered is that the actual target was another Senac child, RJ, who was employed in the bowling alley's bar. Authorities felt he behaved oddly in questionings regarding the shooting. However, I personally feel this would be odd given the timing. I don't know why the shooters would think the bartender would be present at 8 o'clock in the morning. The idea that the shooting was some sort of message aimed at the Senac family was an implication in the documentary, but I'm not certain that it's a probable one. Yes, some of the behaviors were odd, such as RJ's under questioning, and it is true Ron Senac reopened the bowling alley less than a week after the shooting, but what could have been the goal? What was the motive? Another possibility, potentially unrelated to the Senac family, was criminal activity at the time in the area of the bowling alley. On Kansas Avenue, only 3 blocks south of the bowling alley, there was a large Cuban community in the early 90s. Members of this community were heavily into crime and drugs, specifically cocaine. In the previous theory, there were allegations of Ron Senac being involved with cocaine, but it could be unrelated. Or the drug dealers could have heard those same rumors and gone to investigate. The suspects were described as being dark-skinned Hispanic. Could that mean Mexican, or could it mean Cuban? Amy Hauser died at only 13 years old. She was a very intelligent young girl who started to read when she was only 2 years old. She loved to sing and dance. She had a strong relationship with her mother. Stephen Turan was 26 when he died. He had been a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army and had aspirations of being a police officer. He was described as being serious and on the shy side. He had brought his daughters that day because he and his wife both had to work and they couldn't get a babysitter. Paula Hogan, Stephen's stepdaughter, died at the age of 6. She was a friendly, outgoing child who once cheered with the NMSU cheerleaders on the field during a football game for 10 minutes before they realized she wasn't covered by their insurance and had to send her back to the stands. Valerie Turan was barely alive when police and EMTs arrived. She was 2.5 and described as being like her father, very serious and shy, with very expressive eyes. Her mother said that if Valerie liked you, you knew it, and if she didn't like you, you also knew it. Valerie lived for about 45 minutes at the hospital. A nurse held her as she took her last breath. Stephanie Senac was 34 when she was shot. Prior to the shooting, she was outgoing and friendly and afterward became nervous and frightened of everything, once having a panic attack at a parade when she heard something that sounded like a gunshot. She died in 1999 at the age of 43 of complications related to the injuries she received that February day in 1990. Ida Hogan was 33 when she was shot. Melissa Rapace was only 12 and the only one to stay conscious and able to call 911. They are in frequent pain from their injuries and, like Stephanie, nervous as a result. Melissa is married with children at last report, but is a self-described homebody and a stay-at-home mom. Ida hasn't worked since the incident and suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result. Las Cruces Bowl operates these days under the name 10-Pin Alley and no longer seems to be affiliated with the Senac family at all. The Las Cruces Police Department still makes appeals through the media for the public to come forward with any information they might have regarding this crime, if only to provide closure for the survivors and the families of all the victims. Today, the older suspect would be in his late 50s to early 60s. He had dark hair and eyes and was Hispanic or Latino with a dark complexion and appeared to have a receding hairline. He was about 5 foot 5 inches or 165 centimeters tall. He had a medium build. Today, the younger suspect would likely be in his late 40s to early 50s. He also had dark hair and eyes and was Hispanic or Latino with a dark complexion. In 1990, he had a thick mustache. He was between 5 foot 6 inches and 5 foot 8 inches, or 168 to 173 centimeters tall, with a medium build. We can only speculate on the true motives behind the vicious attack on 7 innocent people, 4 of them children. The suspects have never been apprehended. As far as I've been able to tell from the news reports, there was no trace evidence, no fingerprints or fibers or hair. All we have are semi-reliable eyewitness testimonies and the survivors and family members and friends of those who died. Someone knows these men. Someone knows who committed this violent, senseless crime. and that person needs to come forward. Las Cruces Crime Stoppers is offering a $25,000 reward for information that helps identify the men who were responsible for this shooting. You do not have to identify yourself to collect the reward. If you have any information whatsoever that can help solve this crime, I urge you to contact the Las Cruces Police Department at 575-528-4222 or to anonymously contact Las Cruces Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS, which is 1-800-222-8477, or text CRIMES, which is 274637, keyword LCTIPS. Please bear in mind that these are real stories about real people and treat them with the respect they and their families deserve. To contact the authorities regarding this case, their information can be found in the description. Someone out there knows the truth. I only hope that someday they come forward. Thank you and good night.